Free Walk TLV.
Free Walk TLV.
Discover Tel Aviv
like a local.
We all want to get to the heart of important stories, right? To really understand the forces that shaped our world, but, without getting totally bogged down.
Exactly. And that's what we're aiming for today.
We're doing a deep dive into, the foundational story of a really significant movement and the key figure behind it. The sources we have give us a pretty unique window.
We are indeed focusing on Theodor Herzl, his life, his absolutely critical role in the development of Zionism.
And we're mainly looking at a transcript from a YouTube video, The Hope, Theodor Herzl, from the 700 Club.
That's our primary source material, yes.
Okay, so our mission here is basically to pull out the most important insights about Herzl's journey. His ideas, the challenges, his impact.
And there are some genuinely surprising things, especially about his early life and the turning points that really shaped his vision.
Okay, let's get into it then. Where do we start? Maybe with something unexpected.
Let's do that. So, considering he's, the father of modern Zionism, it's pretty startling that back in 1893, he was actually thinking about baptizing Jewish children.
Wow, wait, really? Baptizing them?
Yes, even his own son. It just shows how desperate he was, I think, to find some kind of solution to the anti-Semitism he was experiencing, a real search for acceptance.
The transcript mentions him questioning if he even had the right to make his child face the same difficulties he did as a Jew.
Exactly. And he even floated this idea of like a mass baptism for Jewish kids, thinking they wouldn't really care either way.
That is quite something. Coming from Herzl, it really highlights the pressure, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The pressure, the pervasive anti-Semitism, and how his first instinct was maybe assimilation was the answer.
He was born in Budapest, 1860, a city with a huge Jewish population, right? They called it Judapest.
That's the one. But his own upbringing was, quite far from traditional Jewish life.
Yeah, Christian high school and a confirmation ceremony instead of a bar mitzvah.
Precisely. The source stresses he was highly assimilated. No real formal Jewish education, kind of distant from it all in his youth.
Then they moved to Vienna. He got a law degree. But writing was his passion. Plays, reporting.
That's right. A playwright, a reporter. And through it all, you can see him searching, looking for an answer to this persistent problem of anti-Semitism.
So initially trying to solve it within the existing system, maybe? Integration?
That seems likely, yes. Trying to find a way to overcome it from within European society. But then came an assignment that changed everything.
Okay. This is the move to Paris, right? As a journalist for that big Viennese paper.
Correct. Sent there to cover the wonderful French experience, as they saw it. Progressive, enlightened France.
And at first, he kind of enjoyed it. Parisian life, the theater.
He did, yeah. Immersed himself in the culture. But underneath that shiny surface, he found something else. A really virulent anti-Semitism.
And the thing that really brought it home was the Dreyfus Affair. Can you just quickly remind us what that was about?
Sure. Alfred Dreyfus, Jewish captain, French army, falsely accused of spying for Germany. Herzl was there as a reporter.
He saw the public degradation.
Yes, the transcript describes it vividly. Dreyfus being stripped of his rank, publicly humiliated at the École Militaire.
But it wasn't just the injustice to Dreyfus himself, was it? It was the crowd's reaction.
That was the key. The crowds weren't just angry at Dreyfus. They were shouting, "Death to the Jews," mass anti-Semitism, right there in the streets of Paris.
And the transcript calls that Herzl's aha moment.
Exactly. He suddenly saw it wasn't just about individual prejudice. It was hatred aimed at the entire Jewish people.
And from that realization came the idea that the only solution was a Jewish state.
A radical conclusion, wasn't it? A complete turnaround from thinking about baptism to thinking about national sovereignty. It shows how powerful that experience was.
So after that, he just threw himself into developing this idea.
Totally. Basically locked himself away for 5 days, writing like mad. And the result was his book, The Jewish State.
The transcript mentions his friend finding him all disheveled, worried he'd lost his mind with these wild ideas.
Yeah, even suggested he see a doctor. It really shows you how consumed he was.
But he pushed through, and the book laid out this vision, a new nation.
A nation state, yeah. But not just any state. He saw it as a beacon to humanity, a model democracy. Very optimistic, really.
But optimism doesn't always get an easy ride. I assume people weren't exactly lining up to support it immediately.
Oh, definitely not. There was a lot of skepticism, outright opposition even, and from within the Jewish community, too.
How so?
Well, some religious Jews felt it was, blasphemous, trying to force God's hand, basically, reestablishing Israel before the Messiah came.
Ah, okay.
And then you had the assimilated Jews, people who felt perfectly comfortable and integrated in places like Germany or France. They just didn't see the need for a separate state.
That kind of mirrors the opposition he faced trying to hold the Congress in Munich later.
Exactly the same dynamic. Resistance from those who felt established and didn't want to rock the boat.
But Herzl kept going, trying to make it happen. The transcript mentions him trying to buy land from the Ottoman Sultan. That seems ambitious.
Very ambitious. And his plan to fund it was, let's say, equally optimistic.
Which was?
He figured he'd just ask wealthy Jews to cough up half their fortunes.
Half? Okay, yeah. How did that go down?
Predictably. The transcript notes it had absolutely no chance. That group just wasn't aligned with Zionism at that point.
So, facing skepticism, no big money, yet he still managed to pull off the First World Zionist Congress in 1897. That's pretty impressive.
It really is. And yeah, it was meant to be in Munich, but they had to move it to Basel in Switzerland because of that very opposition from assimilated Jews in Munich. They're worried about, what it would look like.
Highlights the internal struggles right from the start, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But despite that, over 200 delegates came from 17 countries. Think about it. The first real representative Jewish assembly in almost 2,000 years. The atmosphere was apparently electric.
And there were symbols too, right? The flag.
Yeah, behind the podium, white flag, 2 blue stripes, Star of David, clearly the precursor to the Israeli flag.
And this is where Reverend William Heffler comes in, the first Christian Zionist.
That's him, the British embassy chaplain in Vienna. Herzl introduced him that way. He was apparently crucial in helping Herzl make political connections. Became a lifelong friend.
Imagine being there when Herzl gives that first speech. We are here to lay the foundation stone of the house, which is to shelter the Jewish nation.
And the applause was deafening, according to the transcript. You can feel the weight of that moment.
And that quote from the English delegate about weeping by the rivers of Babylon, but resolving to weep no more by the rivers of Basel. Wow.
It captures that shift perfectly, doesn't it? From lament to resolve.
The transcript talks about the jujitsu move of Zionism here, taking the negative energy of antisemitism and turning it positive.
A great way to put it. Instead of just being victims, they use that adversity, that hatred, as fuel to build something, a positive movement for self-determination.
And then Herzl writes that incredible diary entry just days later.
The prophetic one. At Basel, I founded the Jewish state.
If I said this out loud today, I would be answered by universal laughter. Perhaps in 5 years, and certainly in 50, everyone will know it. Chillingly accurate.
It really is. 50 years later, almost to the day, the UN partition plan, then the State of Israel. Amazing. The transcript also notes Herzl himself started observing more Jewish traditions after the Congress, interestingly.
But things didn't get easier, did they? The urgency just grew. The Kishinev pogrom in Russia in 1903. The transcript's description is brutal.
Horrific. Easter Sunday attack, cries of death to the Jews again, just like Dreyfus. Widespread violence, killings, injuries, destruction.
How many died?
Over 40 Jews murdered, many more injured, hundreds of homes and businesses destroyed. It just hammered home how vulnerable Jews were, especially in Eastern Europe. They needed a safe haven, urgently.
So Herzl doubled down on his efforts, meeting British politicians, trying to get land somewhere.
Yes. Initially hoping for Cyprus, or the Sinai Peninsula, both British-controlled then. Yeah. Close to Palestine. A refuge for people fleeing Russia.
But the British offered something else. Uganda.
Well, technically land in British East Africa, what's now part of Kenya, but it became known as the Uganda Plan. A temporary refuge, they suggested.
A new Palestine. How did that go over at the next Zionist Congress?
Like a lead balloon, basically. Huge opposition, especially from the Russian delegates. They were adamant. It had to be Zion, the historical land of Israel, or nothing.
Even a young Chaim Weissman was against it.
Yes, he was one of the leading voices opposing the Uganda plan. For them, anywhere else was just unacceptable, missing the whole point.
And Herzl was deeply disappointed by this rejection.
Very much so. Emotionally hit him hard.
And his last public words were at that 6th Congress, quoting the psalm.
If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. Trebly poignant, knowing what came next.
His health was failing by then. Heart condition.
Yes, declining rapidly. And his dying wish, told to Reverend Herzl, "Greet Palestine for me. I gave my heart's blood for my people."
And he died the next day.
He did. Huge crowds at his funeral in Vienna, though. Showed the impact he'd already had.
And finally, in 1949, his wish was fulfilled. Re-interred in Jerusalem by the new Israeli government.
On a hill overlooking the city, Mount Herzl now.
So summing him up, hero, dreamer, heretic, the transcript uses all those words. But ultimately, he gave people hope.
He gave the Jewish people the hope of going home, as the source puts it, after almost 2,000 years. But it also rightly points out his dream needed others to make it happen. The pioneers, the men of action.
Like the song Wine Beneath My Wings, the transcript references. He provided the vision, the initial push.
Exactly. He lit the spark.
It's just such a powerful story, isn't it? How one person's reaction to their time, to injustice, can set something so massive in motion.
It really is. His journey from that assimilated background to this visionary leader, it tells you so much about the power of ideas and just sheer perseverance.
Makes you think about the complexities of how nations are born and what individuals can actually achieve against the odds.
Definitely. The role individuals play in shaping history.
And those unexpected turns in his own life. How that one really visceral experience with the Dreyfus crowds changed everything for him and for millions eventually.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What things happening today might spark those kinds of huge shifts? What contemporary issues could be the catalyst for the next transformative movement?
Yeah, definitely something to think about.
Free Walk TLV.
Free Walk TLV.
Discover
Discover Tel Aviv like a local.